welcome to Endless Plot Holes. You're here with Sinthu. In today's video, we're going to go over a yearly wrap-up of all the books I've read within 2024. We are nearly at the tail end. I'm just finishing up on Fear the Flames. I'm sort of halfway through it right now, so yeah, I'm not going to consider it as part of 2024, and especially with the Christmas festivities coming up, it's very unlikely I'm going to finish anything whatsoever. There's a lot of books I'm currently reading because I keep sort of going back and forth with different books. Some of the books I am considering DNFing because, yeah, I'm not enjoying them. I went through this list very briefly, and there are some books that my mind does not remember. Like, there's like some aspects of the book I remember, but that's it. So we're going to go through Storygraph, which is what I use to record all the books I read and also review. So yeah, we're going to start from the beginning of the year and then go through to the end of the year. And we can have a look at the statistics as well, because sometimes that's quite fascinating. So I'll see if there's anything interesting, but yeah. So in the beginning of the year, I read The Lightning Thief by Riordan. This is part of the Percy Jackson and the Olympic series, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I gave it 5 stars. This is probably the 3rd or the 4th time I'm reading this particular book. I absolutely enjoy The Lightning Thief. It's just so magical to me and so nostalgic in such an odd kind of specific way, because I really enjoyed Greek mythology to the point where I would do like research on different creatures and different stories. I was very fascinated by the female sort of characters within Greek mythology in specific, and the gods and the goddesses and sort of the chaos that they create. I was just, yeah. So The Lightning Thief follows a demigod, or demigod who is the child of Poseidon and a human, and his journey of realizing he's a demigod and sort of, you know, battling through sort of his internal situation, sort of like, you know, him being sort of a warrior minded person, having to live sort of a normal life and stuff, and then he gets sent to this place called Camp Half-Blood, where he meets people similar to him, and he is open to this new world where he's kind of dealing with all these different sort of challenges, battles. I don't want to give away too much. It's just amazing. It has some of the best themes ever. It has found family. It has so much diversity. One of the best romances I've ever read in my life. Yeah, it's amazing. The second book I read was The Sea of Monsters, which is also part of the Percy Jackson series. Again, just phenomenal. 10 out of 10. Would read again. These books just hold a special place in my heart. It kind of filled the space that Harry Potter actually left, because I read Harry Potter first, and then I sort of didn't have anything else to read. I read The Hunger Games to try and fill that void, and it didn't really fill it because Hunger Games is not very wholesome. So then Percy Jackson came in and swooped me away pretty much, and I love Percy Jackson more than Harry Potter now. I love the kind of the vibes of Harry Potter now, but not the books, because as an older person I'm like, ooh, some of this is a bit problematic, but you know, we live and we learn. The next book I read was The Titan's Curse. Again, phenomenal. I really enjoyed it. Again, I gave it 4 stars. I don't want to go too much into detail of the plots, because obviously that will give away too much and it will be spoilers, but just trust me, bro, it's good. It's if you like anything to do with Greek mythology, if you love reading sort of children's book, as in sort of young adult, I would say, so sort of like teenage years sort of stage, sort of teenagers, adolescents, you know, coming into yourself and sort of realizing who you are and like your identity and all of that stuff, and you know, where you belong and all of that. If you're interested in any of that, you'd love this. If you love found family, this is the best. This is the best series you could ever have. There's such a good sense of found family, because all the children in this book are connected to each other, but in such a peculiar, special way, and the way they deal with that and the way they grapple with that is amazing. The next book I read is Babel, another book with really good found family. This book put a mirror to my face. It was like, look at yourself and think about what you've done. It's a book about language. It's a book about sort of some fantasy element and the magic of interpretation and the meanings that are lost between sort of translating from one language to the other and what is being missed in the middle. And yeah, this book basically put a mirror to me, and I felt really sort of like taken aback by the fact that I don't think in my language anymore. So my mother tongue is Tamil, and I'm now speaking in English. I am very fluent in English, whereas I'm not as fluent in Tamil. I'm very bad at reading and writing in Tamil as well. I can read and write, not very well, but yeah, it just put a mirror to my face being like, you are one of the reasons your language is going to disappear, basically. And this book had some of the most thought-provoking sentences, ideas, sort of, you know, themes and like plot points. It made me realize just how intrinsic discrimination can be, how badly that colonization affected those who were colonized. It really made me understand and realize that where I learned English, an English person is not always required to learn another language wherever they go. They're more likely to be expected to be understood, and everyone else is supposed to cater to that person. This might be a very hot take, I don't care, but I really don't care. The next book I read was The Stolen Heir. So this is part of the Cruel Prince sort of series, and this is the duology that came straight after the trilogy that came out, excuse me. And yeah, I loved it. I enjoyed it. This had a lot more romance than The Cruel Prince did, so if you are not interested, don't read it. It had one of my favourite female characters ever, because the female character is a basic monster. She's just a beast, and she's just amazing at being a beast. I love her to bits, and she had the worst childhood, and a lot of bits made me cry. A lot of parts I was like rooting for this girl. I just wanted her to win. I just wanted her to have a moment where she received love, not from a romantic partner, but from an adult. Someone just who could hug her, hold her, and embrace her and be like, you're okay, you have someone here who supports you and will guide you. But yeah, it's a very, very good book. I think it also kind of explores the fact that an abandoned child can go a particular way and how they can heal and come back from it. It's generational trauma, and it talks a lot on generational trauma, but with the background of fantasy, which I really enjoyed. My main gripe with this was the fact that there was a bit too much romance and a lot less politics, and there was a lot more emotion to this book, which I didn't mind, but it wasn't what I was expecting, which was the issue for me. The next book was Twisted Lies. I have a very funny relationship with the Twisted series and with Anna Huang. Anna Huang makes me annoyed. Every time I read her books, I get so annoyed because she's a crazy good writer, I think. I think she has the capability to write something incredible, but the characters and the plots are just, oh, so annoying. So Twisted Lies follows a I've even forgotten what she is. She's an influencer, actually. So it follows an influencer, her relationship with her landlord, who basically gave his one of his apartments for sort of like chump change, basically, for rent. And he just requires her to water his plants, and you know, it's their relationship and the blossoming of their relationship. And this has sort of, the Twisted series has my most sort of hated type of smart in the world. I hate the way Anna Huang writes smart. So a lot of the books get skipped, honestly, because I could not be bothered. But this book again had that thing where it looked like everything was going okay, and then it got to the 75% mark, and then something happened, and I was like, wow, what am I supposed to, like, what am I supposed to do? I thought this was the one book I was gonna like of Anna Huang's, but I just did not. I just hated it. Because yeah, I don't really want to spoil anything, but I kind of do. Because I don't think it's actually worth reading. But okay, I'm not gonna spoil anything. Just to spare you guys. But yeah, something happens, and I was like, is this what we're doing? Is this what we're doing? So basically, in all of the Twister series, except the one book with Reese Larson, every single one of those books has very toxic men who exhibit very toxic masculinity behaviors. They do certain things and say certain things, and I'm like, maybe we don't do that. Maybe we don't say that. Not in this economy, mate. But yeah, it was okay. Yeah, I gave it 1 star. If it wasn't clear, I gave it 1 star. That one thing just, yeah, it just, we don't support that. We don't support that in this household. Okay, the next book I read was The Prisoner's Throne. This again is a duology, so this is the second part of the Stolen Heir series, and this had a very interesting and surprising change in POVs. It followed the male main character for the, you know, for like, this is the first time I think I've actually read in the perspective of the male main character. I don't usually like reading in the men's perspective, but this book, this particular book was good. It wasn't sort of in first person, but it was sort of third person, but following him rather than the female main character, which I think was a good change as well, because it spoke to the political sort of aspects and the larger, wider situation at play. But I don't really think the politics in this particular book was done as well as The Cruel Prince, which was a bit sad, which was a bit disappointing. But you know, you win some, you lose some with these books. But the romance in this book, 10 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. I really love a groveling, sad, pathetic man. I enjoyed very, like, the levels of sacrifice that Oak was willing to go through to keep Ren. Yeah, he was amazing. Yeah. The next book that I read was So Not Meant to Be, and this is one of the books that I don't remember anything about. All I remember was there was a romance between these two characters. It was a sister of someone, and then it was the brother of that sister's husband. And yeah, that's all I remember. And there was something about a pigeon, saving the pigeons or something like that, and there was a pigeon called Kazoo. That's all I remember. I gave it 2 stars, so it clearly wasn't good enough. The next book I read was The Final Offer, which was part of the Dreamland Billionaire series. This was the third and final book, and I did not like it. It was my least favourite of the 3 books. I found the main male character to be grating. I really could not stand him. He was so annoying to me. He sounded privileged. He sounded like he just didn't have a grasp of real life, and it was pathetic to read. And with all the Dreamland Billionaires boys, they all have this habit of just sort of throwing money at whatever problem the female main character is going through, and somehow that's meant to solve everything. But yeah, did not like Final Offer at all. I liked the main female character actually, because she had a lot going for her in terms of her ambitions, what she wanted to do with her life. She was a mother to an adopted girl, and yeah, she was just wonderful. There were so many facets about her life that I wanted to be explored, and I just didn't care for the male character actually, honestly. I think if the male character didn't exist I would have liked this book even more. But yeah, he existed and there was a whole romance with him, and yeah, we don't like that. The next book is Open Water, another book I don't really remember. It was a very beautiful love story. That's all I remember. I gave it 5 stars. Yeah, it was a very lyrical book, very, like, it read like a song, and I don't really know how else I can describe it. It read like a beautiful sort of rhythmic sort of essay, and it was beautiful. It was just really, really stunning. The writing was great, like the tone of voice, the language, the vernaculars, just mm, mm, just amazing. And it was also very thought-provoking because it was written from the perspective of a black male character, and it spoke to a relationship with a black female character. So it spoke to the situations that they're faced within within London as black people, and the brutalities as well, and the type of way people look at them is very interesting. And the next book was The Inheritance Games. This is a very interesting murder mystery sort of book, so it's very alike to the film Knives Out, I think it's called. It's where there's so many different suspects and they're trying to figure out this murder. There's a huge mansion and there's like a large sum of money that's at contest as well. So within this one, for a lack of a better term, a poor girl randomly inherits this billionaire's entire wealth, and she has to distribute it to the billionaire's grandchildren. I think there's 4 of them. There's 4 boys, if I'm not mistaken, and she has to move into this mansion, live in this mansion for 1 year, I think, and she has to figure out all these different puzzles and figure out basically these secrets and these situations that have happened. And yeah, like all this like sort of controversial stuff that happens basically. Yeah, I would give it probably like 3.5 because the female main character was the one good thing about the book, which is really sad to say because I have a very like annoying sort of gripe with rich men, because sometimes what they say is just very out of touch and very cartoonish and very comical, and this book was one of those books. I did kind of have to sort of step out of myself a little bit and just be like, you know, this is how they talk, this is how they are, and you know, we're just gonna have to take it as it is. It was a bit campy, a bit weird. The vibes were like that. There was a twist, which I guess like within, I guessed the twist maybe 50% into the book, which was really sad. I wish I didn't go into it trying to guess what happened and all this stuff, but it's a murder mystery book. That's what you're meant to do, isn't it? So it was a bit sad that I kind of knew the ending before the ending even happened, but you know, hey ho. The next book I read was Powerless by Lauren Roberts, and I also read Reckless by Lauren Roberts as well. I think I read this like within the space of like 5 days. And I really enjoyed it. It was a very unoriginal book. I want to start off there. It's borderline plagiarism, but it was very good. It was very delectable. It was one of those books that I just ate it up. I was so fast in reading this because it had a lot of similar themes to sort of Hunger Games and other fantasies alike to Hunger Games, and it had like tiny bit of Akatar, maybe, you know, just throw a bunch of different fantasy books together and you'll get Powerless and Reckless. But I just really loved the female main character and the male main character. I just love their banter and their relationship and their perspectives. When they speak to each other and when they speak about each other, it's just beautiful. Like when the guy speaks about the girl, it's just heart-wrenching. It's so sweet. But yeah, it follows a girl who is powerless basically in a world of powerful, so everyone else has different powers and she's the only one who doesn't have, she's not the only one, she's one of the people who doesn't have powers, and for that she's discriminated against within this country. Actually, she's killed for this, she's meant to be killed for this, but she ends up sort of faking her way through it, and she ends up in this sort of weird Hunger Games sort of game where she's meant to fight against all these powerful people, and she's also meant to seem like she's also powerful, but she actually isn't. So it's basically very similar to Hunger Games, where, you know, it's televised and people send in gifts and you have to make a particular impression and all this blah blah blah. It's like, it's very similar to Hunger Games, to the point where it's very, like, we're in very weird, murky areas for copyright. But anyways, regardless of that, she's meant to fake that she is powerful. So she goes into this game and she somehow manages to fake herself all the way through. And it's basically the friendships and the enemies she earns along the way. And yeah, she meets the commander, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a commander that she meets. So he's like the head commander, and she becomes sort of like not friends with him, not enemies with him, just acquaintances with him before the games, and they basically continue on their relationship within the games, and they sort of develop sort of a trust and a relationship with each other. And there's obviously treason because she is powerless, and it follows on from there to do with their conflict and how they kind of get through things. And there is a love triangle as well, of course there is, but yeah, I'm not going to say any more. Just give it a read. You'll see that it's very similar to Hunger Games and everything else, but it's just a very easy read, and I find it so hard to fault it, but I do understand that it was bad that it was written this way. I feel like she could have done more to make it more creative and different to the Hunger Games. It was way too similar. I think it just was a tiny bit too similar, but you know, we move. The next book I read was Once Upon a Broken Heart. I read this book twice within the last year because I read it on the coach to and from Derby. I met one of my friends there, and yeah, it was a fever dream. We were on that coach for like 7 hours. It was disgraceful. We were caught in an accident basically, and we were just stuck in standstill traffic for 3 hours. So I just finished the whole book within that trip. But when I tried to write the review for it, didn't remember anything, to the point where I didn't even remember the main character, but I somehow managed to remember the ending. It always happens to me that way. But this is a book about a girl who is in love with a boy who is set to marry her stepsister. She naturally thinks the stepsister cursed him, so she goes off to find a fate called the Prince of Hearts, who aids to do with sort of romances, and usually it's frowned upon to ask for the favour of a fate because it's usually a double-ended sword, but she doesn't give a crap. So she goes off and speaks to this fate, and he's like, you know what, I'll help you, but in exchange I want 3 kisses, and these 3 kisses are not for him, but he's going to orchestrate a particular situation, and she has to kiss whoever he asks for her to kiss, basically. So, and it follows what happens with those 3 kisses and how it kind of basically makes her life chaotic and just crazy. And she basically girl bossed a bit too close to the sun. She travels to all these different like magical environments and places. She meets very powerful people. She gets married to a prince, weirdly enough. It has one of my favorite romances, honestly. This book and this book series has the slowest burn. You don't know who you don't know who the actual male main lead is until the 3rd book, I'm pretty sure, where you find out, oh, this is who he is. But my god, is the payoff really nice. It's so sweet. I just love the way Stephanie Garber builds her characters up, builds her world as well. She creates such a good descriptive sort of idea. So when you read her books, you can basically picture every single building she's talking about, every single outfit. It's just gorgeous. She also uses media, funnily enough, to move the plot along. So every time there's sort of like a stagnant bit, she uses media to sort of push it forwards in some way or other. Media is also used where like we're following a couple of different characters and what they're doing, and you kind of see what this periphery character is doing and how this may impact the future. But I really enjoy Once Upon a Broken Heart and the rest of the book series as well. The next book I read was The Shadows Between Us, which I don't remember. Again, this was a fantasy series about sort of arranged marriage, maybe, I think. And yeah, there was a male character who had something to do with shadows. Like whenever he comes up, there's shadows and they fight for him and all this stuff. I think that's all I remember. It wasn't a very memorable book, and I didn't think I could enjoy it either. So yeah. The next book I read is If You Could See the Sun. So this is about I can't talk. I've been talking too long. If You Could See the Sun, which is about a girl who is in high school and she discovers that she has the ability to turn invisible, not at will. Keywords. So she decides she's just gonna make money out of it. She's going to a very prestigious high school, which requires her to pay for fees and stuff. So she's like, okay, if I can make my own money by sort of snooping on other people's businesses and sort of, you know, finding out information for other people when I'm invisible, I might as well do that. So it just follows how that can become really, really exploitative. So yeah, it was a very fun read. I gave it 5 stars. I just really enjoyed it. It was a very easy but like very light romance, very light fantasy. It had a romance subplot, but it wasn't the main plot. It was more friendship and sort of like your collegiality towards all your peers, basically, and how much respect you have for everyone else. And it was also about class and the differences between classes and how that can impact the way you see yourself and the people around you as well. The next book I read was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. I can't say her name properly. I've tried my best. But this is the stage adaptation version. So it was performed, I think, in theatres last year and the year before. It has some really famous actors actually within the stage adaptation. I wish I got to see it in person, but I just didn't. This is a very traumatic book. It's a very scary, very spooky, not in the horror way, but in the very real life, very sort of sad way. It's very depressing. The ending is depressing. Everything about this book is depressing. It's such a mammoth of a book, and it pulls at every single string in your heart. And yeah, when you embark on reading this, if you do, you have to look at the trigger warnings, because literally every single trigger that could possibly exist exists within this book, and it's just way too much. Like, it's like putting on the volume way too high, and the heat is way too high, and everything is so overwhelming. The emotions are so overwhelming. And yeah, this book, every time I read it, it just makes me think of my friends differently, and it gives me such a new perspective on my friendships and my relationships. It makes me want to reach out to people that I've never reached out to before. But definitely don't recommend it at all whatsoever. It's a very hard book to read, and you should read it when you're in a mentally good space, because it can really hurt you really badly. The next book I read was The Ballad of Never After, and the book I read after that is A Curse for True Love, which is part of the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I'm not going to go too much into detail about the plot. Again, just same compliments, really good descriptions, really good world building, good use of media. It was just a very creative book, and yeah, I recommend it to anyone who loves fantasy, who loves romance, who loves like the whimsy and the fairy tale as well. It's a very fairy tale like book. So it's like taking ACOTAR but making it more fairy tale, but it's not anything like ACOTAR at all, honestly. But it was a very stunning book. Like, just visualizing all these different places was just, mentally I was having a great time. It felt like I was watching a movie, honestly. The final book I read was The King of the Fae by Ava Mason. And nothing happened in this book that was very significant. There was a very big sort of battle towards the 75% mark of the book, and then the female main character and the male main character go into the kingdom. So they are actually stepping into this world that, you know, she's meant to be an integral part of. She's meant to, like, you know, topsy-turvy something or other within the politics and blah blah blah. but yeah, nothing truly significant happens in this book, and for that reason I'm not going to carry on with this series, because none of the characters made me feel engaged or like committed. I didn't feel any empathy towards any of the characters whatsoever. I was tired as well, and some of the stuff that was being said by both the male character and the female character was just, I just looked at it and I was like, are we really saying that right now? And the male main character had some misogynistical takes on certain things that the female main character was doing. He wanted her to do certain things which were to me very absurd, because he comes into her life and he's like, okay, let's get out, let's go to my kingdom and let's sort this out, and it's like, we don't do that in this household, because that's very unsafe, honestly. But yeah, those were my books for the 2024. Now let's go on to my stats. Let's see if I can actually pull the stats up. It's loading. We're on the little loading screen now. My most read mood is adventurous, and the second most is emotional, and then the third most is dark, and then the fourth most is funny. So yeah, I do love my adventures and I do love my emotions, so it does make sense. But dark is a bit questionable. I don't know what dark even means at this point, but I guess some books could be considered dark. The next section is pace, and I read a lot of fast-paced and medium-paced books, and I think I must have read only one book that I would have considered as slow. The next section is page numbers, and I read 300 to 499 pages being my most read page numbers, and then I read 25% of 500 plus words. Page numbers? No, not words, page numbers, yes, page numbers. I just got very confused there. Maths is not my strong suit. And yeah, and the next section is fiction or non-fiction, and if you can look right here, you can see my ring light, sorry. It's fully 100% fiction. I don't read non-fiction. There's only like one or two like non-fiction books I've read in the past where I'm like, okay, this is decent, but everything else I find too repetitive and annoying, honestly. The next section is genres, and my most read genre was fantasy, the second most was young adult, and then the third most was romance, and that's very unsurprising to me. Interestingly, I read a historical book. I don't know which one that is. I apparently read another book that is middle grade. Oh, I suppose Percy Jackson is middle grade. Okay, I guess that's where that came from. But yeah. In terms of the format of books, as you can see, the large majority is print and some of it was audiobooks. I do prefer audiobooks because it's a lot easier to sort of put it on and then do something else, but yeah, I am becoming more of a print person, or like reading on this or reading on my Kobo. My most read authors was Stephanie Garber, Riordan, Lauren Roberts and Holly Black, because I read their series and I finished their series as well. The next section is the number of books and pages I've read. Woo! And my most sort of read month was June, which is quite accurate. June or July, I can't tell, but it's very accurate, honestly, because I was on a bunch of different sort of trips and I was traveling places, so I had the ability to read during my commutes or my travels, basically. Whereas sort of towards September, October, November and stuff, I became very slow because just life was happening. The next bit is the star ratings. So I gave 3 books 5 stars, 2 books 4 stars, 1 book 2 star, and 1 book 1 star. And there's a couple of books that are not on the star rating list, mainly because I might have forgotten it and then I would have reminded myself and I just wouldn't have updated the star ratings. But yeah, some of the books I didn't even review, because I usually like reviewing really in-depth in Storygraph, but I might have not had the time, or I might have just been like, let's just get this on this and then like do it later, and I just must have forgotten. But yeah, that's it for 2024. Next year I'm hoping to read more. I do have a very arbitrary target of 40 books next year, but you know, things happen, but I'm very hopeful that I can get to that point. In 2023 I did reach 40 books, and in 2022 I also reached 40 books, which is where this number 40 is coming from. But very excited for next year. I've got a bunch of books that are lined up for me. My TBR is always overflowing, but I do have plans on what I'm going to read. I'm also going to be doing a 24-hour challenge in January, so hopefully I'll be able to cover a lot more books during that time. And yeah, and I will hopefully see you soon in another video.